the state of play of the EU-US trade relation and our opinion to the AFET committee on a report on the EU-US political relations. I guess everybody is aware about the situation, and I'm really happy that Leopoldo is here with us, so welcome, to give us a hint about the thinking of the Commission, specifically regarding the trade relations. We had a lot of intensive discussion with the United States side since 3.5 weeks, where we tried to find a solution in the way of negotiation. And we had our plenary on the 9th of July, where we saw that President Trump made a new deadline for the so-called reciprocal tariffs. I would say it's more the baseline tariffs or the inflation tariffs to the 1st of August. Nevertheless, there was a clear understanding that there might be some elements of a framework agreement coming during the last weekend. But, as you know, there was a letter during the weekend, but it was not an offer for a framework agreement. It was additional pressure towards the European Union, increasing this so-called reciprocal tariffs, and I would say this inflation tariffs, from announced in 2nd of April from 20% to 30% on the goods covered by this baseline tariffs. There was, of course, a discussion what to do during the weekend, and the Commission decided to postpone the first set of countermeasures, which originally should come into force today in the morning, postpone it until the 6th of August, which was decided today, so a little bit after the 1st of August deadline from President Trump. And of course, my opinion was that after this long discussion during negotiation and after having an unfriendly move seen by the US President when he increased the tariffs on steel and aluminium from 25% to 50%, even in a situation where we are negotiated, we saw this additional unfriendly act, and therefore my personal view was that we should stick to the first set of countermeasures. The Commission has decided differently and wanted to postpone it again. And of course, Leopoldo, you will explain this to us. And then we have the AFET opinion, where we put until now some more general amendments regarding the trade relations on the table. But of course, we have to modify the opinion in full knowledge of the situation where we are now. So, Leopoldo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, honourable members. Or should I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone that is listening to us. So a quick recap of the preceding episodes. I always start with the obvious, that we should never forget that the United States and the European Union share the deepest, widest, strongest economic, trade and investment link in the world by far. It's the transatlantic relationship is an artery of world trade, makes up 17% of EU trade. Now we have the new US measures in place. In terms of the level of duties, we are now faced with 50% on steel, aluminium, and derivatives, 25% on car and car parts, plus the MFN duty, and now 30%, a 10% universal tariff for the time being that President Trump, as you know, has indicated in a letter that it would go up to 30% on the 1st of August. These levels of duties cover 70% of the EU exports to the US, in other words, 380 billion. But there are a certain number of ongoing investigations by the US administration under the Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. There's 7 now in total, which cover commercial aircraft, jet engines and parts, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, critical minerals, copper, timber and lumber, and truck parts. If the administration, if the president decided to impose duties also on these products, then it's 97% of the EU exports to the US that would be covered by additional duties. Now, as you know, the Commissioner, in particular Commissioner Šefčovič, has engaged very intensively with the US. I think we have calculated that now we are at 10 trips to Washington, D.C. So far this year, without counting the phone calls and the DVCs and so on. And despite, and I stress, the advanced stage of the negotiations, which we carried out in good faith, the US has, or President Trump has sent this letter announcing the position of a 30% baseline duty as of 1st of August. Chairman, you have been on the record indicating that this letter is unjustified, unproductive, and doesn't help finding a negotiated outcome. President von der Leyen is on record saying that we have taken note of this letter, that 30% of duties disrupt value chains to the detriment of businesses and citizens on both sides of the Atlantic. But she has also insisted, and we have insisted also with the member states, that the priority remains to negotiate. So we remain ready to finding an agreement with the US. So again, the priority is to remain calm, united, and pursue the EU interest. How do we want to do this? In 4 ways. First of all, we want to continue the negotiations. There's paradoxically a lot of time until the 1st of August. We have been working very diligently towards an agreement, respecting the red lines, the principled positions that we have agreed, including with you, for example, on not engaging in negotiations on the EU legislation. Now we want to continue doing these negotiations. But then, of course, we have to be prepared for any scenarios, and this is why we have to continue the work concerning rebalancing measures or countermeasures, whatever you want to call them. But we have to be clear that any countermeasures must remain a means to an end and not an end in themselves. We should never forget that tariffs, whether the US impose them or we impose them, remain costly for the economy. So what we want to do is the following. We have decided to postpone, as Chairman, as you were saying, the entry into force of the measures that had already been agreed with the Member States, the so-called steel measures, again, because we want to keep the space for a negotiation. But we have also concluded the public consultation that we launched in May on a package of products covering 95 billion euros worth of EU imports from the US. So we have concluded that. We have done an analysis. And so whenever we feel that the time is ripe to proceed to measures concerning that list, if you want, the administration is ready to do that. President von der Leyen kept on saying that everything is on the table, so indeed I can also confirm that the administration is practically ready on also considering measures that do not cover goods. Yeah. The second point is that we have to continue deepening the partnerships with like-minded countries. So we have to continue talking to other trading partners that are also on the receiving end. And what is very, very important is that, of course, we must go much further than just talking. So we need to move forward decisively with the trade agreements which have been finalized and need to be ratified, and bring ongoing negotiations to conclusion and fruition. You have heard over the weekend that President von der Leyen has reached a political agreement on the negotiations with Indonesia, with the President of Indonesia. And, of course, you know that we have concluded the preparatory work to be able to present the agreements with Mercosur and the modernized agreement with Mexico to the Council and the Parliament to conclude these agreements. But we also need to forge ahead with the ongoing negotiations, be them with India, the United Arab Emirates, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and others. Finally, we need to continue to be very vigilant on the risk of circumvention and trade diversion, because, of course, what the United States is doing is that it is changing the terms of trade, so there is a risk of trade diversion. So we have set up, as you know, a dedicated import surveillance task force, which is now operational, and we continue now monitoring the situation, and we remain ready to apply the available tools in our trade instrument toolbox should we see that the legal conditions are met to intervene in case of trade diversion. This is where we are. If you want, the summary is that we want to continue giving the priority to a negotiated outcome. So we're very mobilized to this. The contacts with the United States administration continue. We have done very good progress in the negotiations so far, and we still have a bit of time. 2 weeks is an incredibly long time in the current situation with the US to find an agreement in principle with the US. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Leopoldo. You can imagine that, of course, as rapporteur for this issue, I have a lot of questions. First question is on this steel and car tariffs. They are in force round about for now 4 months. Can you give me a figure how much tariff we are paying per month or daily to the United States on this illegal and unjustified basis? And at the moment I see no solution that this will be decreased in a reasonable time. Or can you give me some hints that this will happen? So how much are we paying on an illegal and unjustified base daily or per month for the budget of the United States? And secondly, you now also postponed the first list, you call it the steel list, to the 6th of August, and possible we will have a second list, let's call it the car list, ready until the 6th of August as well. How you plan to involve the European Parliament in this process? As you know, this week is the last week of sessions. What is your idea, or would you say this is not so important that the Parliament should out of the game? Thirdly, on the negotiations, at the end of the day, of course, if we change tariffs or other deal, it has to come to the Parliament, that's for sure. And therefore, I guess it makes sense perhaps to have a close discussion with the Parliament as well, so that we can really have a common understanding if such a framework agreement is a good deal or a bad deal. And perhaps you can give me some ideas what at the moment you said the negotiations are going quite well. What is in the basket of negotiations? So I heard a lot of rumors. I heard, for example, a rumor that we will really reduce for US cars the tariffs to 0, and the United States will reduce their tariffs from 25% to 15%. For me, it's not really balanced, to be honest. So can you give me some hints what is in the negotiation basket so that we have a sense if this might be a good agreement or not? And fourthly, can you guarantee that if there is a framework agreement, that this is the final exercise? Will be there a standstill clause in, or do we have to anticipate that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, Mr. Trump has an idea, or the deficit in the budget is too high, that he will come with new tariffs? And lastly, reading this letter on Saturday quite carefully, specifically the last sentences where he said that we have closed our market with non-tariff barriers, with some other measures to close the market, where my suspect is that he is thinking about some European legislation as a barrier for US products coming to the European market, or perhaps also barriers for tech companies having business without any fines or without any restrictions here. So I have always in my mind this phrase from Mr. Zuckerberg describing his business model. It's growing and breaking. And breaking, he of course making in his mind was legislation. So are you ready to put the ACI on the table as well to protect, if in the negotiations this element of using tariffs as a political pressure to undermine our legislation will come up? These are 5 main questions from my side, but I guess my colleagues will have also some reflection on that. And Jürgen Warbaum is representing the shadow Siliana from the EPP, please.
Thank you, Bernd. Yes, we have, it's quite obvious, we have not always agreed with the United States on everything, but historically, of course, we have maintained a respectful and a meaningful dialogue. However, of course, the 30% threat during this weekend is not a serious negotiation tactic at all. These will jeopardize people's savings, livelihoods, and future plans in a profound way. I still support the Commission in postponing or continuing rather to negotiate until the 1st of August. I think that is wise. But of course we also have to in parallel plan for smart, effective and meaningful retaliation. We have now sought to de-escalate in all the situations that we could, but inaction cannot become our policy, and therefore I think it is good that the second list is now prepared so that if necessary we can retaliate as soon as possible. It is of course also good that we now have a conclusion of the political agreement with Indonesia, and we need to continue to push Mercosur, Mexico, our South Asian partners further, India and so on, because when one market seems to close, we have to open a new one. You mentioned 4 points, 4 ways of going ahead. I'd like to add a 5th one, and that is the WTO point, because we have MC14 coming up next year, and we need to have some kind of predictability at these very turbulent times. And WTO, of course, provides for that. And therefore, we need to push for more WTO reform together with other members. And my question builds on that. I only have one question. And that is, a few weeks ago, the Commission publicly denied rumors that the Commission would accept a 10% baseline tariff. Would you say that this is still the position from the Commission?
Thanks a lot. Anna.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The decision of President Trump's administration to impose 30% tariffs on EU products is further proof that the Commission is not able to lead these negotiations to an effective conclusion. And given, we now have another month to arrive at a kind of agreement with the United States, but without really knowing how this is going to happen. So when it comes to the strategy or tactics that has been used by the European Commission, well, is it the right strategy? Because we did have initially the deadline of the 9th of July, and everybody seemed to understand that we would be arriving at an agreement with the United States. And everybody thought, as I said, that we were close to an agreement. So when it comes to the US side, do we have the same negotiators, the same issues? And is it always the same strategy as well that is being imposed by the United States on different countries, different regions? And how are we dealing with this? Because we seem to see that there's a problem on the side of the European Commission to arrive at any kind of agreement with the United States. So it's a question about the strategy, etc., of the United States.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Kolz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the updates. Obviously, the EU-US relationship is of strategic partnership, not just economically. It's much, much larger partnership that we are having. And, of course, the overarching aim should remain zero for zero tariffs. That should be overarching position from EU point of view. And, until recently, we were negotiating around a 10% baseline tariff. That is actually since, March. That is already we are paying. I think this comes what Chairman also asked, what is actually already the impact of these tariffs. So now we are facing blunt 30% in a span of 2 weeks to be negotiated. So I agree that the Commission is right not to escalate for escalation's sake. That's absolutely right. But what exactly is the Commission's strategy now? Wait for political agreement in principle with general tariffs and settle for marginal sector gains? Or are we preparing to accept an uneven outcome to avoid failure? And if that's the case, we really need to know. Our businesses need to know. The industry needs to know. Business cannot operate indefinitely in uncertainty. It's been already 3 months. Everyone is planning ahead, and this uncertainty is really something that's not giving good. I welcome all the new trade agreements, announcements, Indonesia, and etc. But let's be assured, I will repeat, U.S. is our strategic partner. It's not just economic trading partner, it's our strategic partners. When it comes, for example, Indonesia, let's just put behind our ear that it's a member of BRICS. And let's just listen what the U.S. administration is saying to the BRICS member states. That if they're going to impose, and probably they're going to impose tariffs to U.S., they will retaliate anyone who is trading with the BRIC countries. That includes, potentially, European Union. So I think what we need to hear is, in 2 weeks' time, what is really manageable to achieve in order for our business to really settle. So we are facing 10% baseline, that's going to stick, or we're going to go to zero tariff, or U.S. is not even listening to zero tariff proposal. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Karin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Commission for the important update to us here today. The United States has announced announcement of new 30% tariffs on European goods is not only unjustified, it is a direct attack on the EU. The European Union must now give in to President Trump's blackmail. Despite our efforts to avoid escalation, the US administration has chosen threats and coercion over cooperation. This is deeply disappointing and undermines transatlantic relations at a critical geopolitical moment. Since January, the European Union has showed patience with a new approach to trade by the United States. When the American president has challenged our relationship, questioned our cooperation for peace and security, we have stayed calm, focused and constructive because it's in our common interest. But now, after a month of unpredictability and, let's say, one-man show, we have reached the point where it's necessary to speak up and act and to use the European power. It's time to use the language that President Trump understands. So my question is the Commission prepared now to activate the EU's anti-coercion instrument? Because I think we really have to evaluate the strategy. We are impatient. We want to see a result. And as it's very obvious during the negotiations, during the talks, the president continues to realize this campaign diplomacy, this campaign negotiations, and it's actually not serious. So please, could you explain more to us more in detail if and when you are ready to act? Because the EU has to stand firm, united and ready to use every tool at our disposal to protect our interests, defend jobs and uphold the rules-based international trading system. We also have instruments designed precisely for this kind of situation. So if not now, then. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me be clear, and I think all of us probably agree that the newest escalation by President Trump over the weekend is really outrageous and is also going against the EU's very cooperative approach, as you said, trying to find a negotiated solution, trying to find an agreement that is whatever, mutual beneficial. But I have to say, and I said it before, but I have the feeling we are now kind of at a turning point where we should think about, as European Union, to probably change a little bit our tactics, our negotiation strategy, because obviously the cooperative one that is very built in the EU, and I understand it, is actually not working with a person, a bully, a blackmailer like Trump. Sorry to be so blunt, but I have the feeling the more cooperative we are, the more he is escalating. And don't you think it would be better to, instead of withdrawing, for example, this idea of a digital tax? There were media reports about the weekend. I don't know if it's true. Instead of withdrawing all these ideas that would also hurt the American economy, and not for the sake of hurting, not for the sake of revenge, but for the sake of changing the behavior of the Trump administration, to get back to the negotiation table and to find agreement, to be a little bit more tough, to put the retaliation measures in place already now, because we have already unlawful tariffs in place, to activate the anti-coercion instrument, like Karin Karlsbrühe said, and to come forward with other measures in order to really get Trump back at the negotiation table, because obviously the cooperative approach isn't working. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Martin.
Vielen Dank, Bernd.
Yes, thank you, Bernd, and thank you for that contribution. I have an impression that we find ourselves in a situation of an extremely paradoxical communication, extremely paradoxical political communication on the part of the European Commission. We had the debate last week in plenary in Strasbourg, and we heard that good progress was being made and that we were negotiating very well together with the US side, and there were considerable expectations and hope that we'd be getting an agreement over the next few days. And then we get the letter at the weekend, and we hear de facto the same thing from the Commission. So I have the impression that the analysis of who we're negotiating with is not really working. So you have this a letter published by the State Department basically seem to hint at some kind of regime change on the side of the Europeans. So we have the United States under Donald Trump and they have brought about a change in direction, a very brutal change in direction. They're trying to get their own economic policy through to defend their economic interests, and they're doing this through a trade war. And I think we have to move away from the current approach, because if you're trying to cooperate, it looks rather helpless. It sort of looks as if the European Union is willing to defend itself, and in the face of a very strong partner. The anti-coercion instrument has been referred to. Well, yes. Why are we not communicating about this and in clearer language? What about changing attitudes about this? And then we know that economists are saying, well, what about a digital tax? Because there is a key interest on the part of U.S. digital trade. That's one avenue that we could explore as well. Why can we not do this? And then a final question relating to the non-tariff trade barriers that Bernd referred to this. I would like to hear extremely clearly from you, given that there is this additional pressure from the United States. And this is not being discussed. Well, what about our own legislation? We have this legislation, and why should we be making concessions on it?
Chair of the U.S. delegation, Bernd Lange.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear Commission, the recent letter from President Trump to President von der Leyen is a clear provocation, and it's very concerning for its impact on the European economy and the relations. So I echo many of the concerns by colleagues. But I have to say that also Commission response delaying countermeasures until August 1st raises concerns. We are already facing illegal and punitive tariffs, which are harming our businesses, workers, and the integrity of the single market. This is not time for hesitation or for seeking lowest common denominator in our response. We need to send a strong and united message. Europe will not be intimidated or divided by external pressure. The Commission role is not simply to consult Member States forever, but to act decisively in defence of European interests. If we continue to react with regret but without action, we only reinforce perception of a divided union and embolden further provocations. Our credibility in negotiations depends on our willingness to deploy leverage, not just express willingness to talk. We must show we are prepared to defend our economic sovereignty while remaining open to agreement, provided it is reached on equal terms and by August 1st deadline. Only through unity and firmness we can protect our citizens and ensure a balanced transatlantic partnership, which is of extreme value from both economies in Europe and on the other side of the Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Leopoldo. This was the first round. For the second round, I have so far 6 requests. So 10 up to 15 minutes to answer all questions. Quite precise. Okay,
thank you very much for the various questions. I'll try to go in the order. I may digress a little bit. So indeed, the steel and cars measures are in force by the US, and my colleagues tell me that on steel at 50% duties. The additional amount of duties that we would be paying on a yearly basis would be 13.7 billion euros, whereas for cars, it would be something like 18 billion euros. Okay, so these are the figures for you. What are the plans to involve the European Parliament? So, for the time being, the various countermeasures, the Steel 1 and 2, possibly also additional countermeasures, are based on the enforcement regulation from a legal point of view, which allows the Commission to adopt implementing acts. Despite the legal situation, we have consistently made the best efforts to keep the European Parliament involved. So, it might be that we run the phones sometime at the end of July, that we send emails sometime at the end of July, Now, if anybody in the Parliament wants to call a meeting, a monitoring group, a formal meeting of INTA or whatever, we shall be there because we have ensured that we will be in various formations in Brussels. My colleagues have been working literally day and night since the taking of duties of the President, and we will continue to be there. Now, the idea for the time being of these negotiations, and these are negotiations, these are not talks. Now, words matter. We're not chatting with the US. We are negotiating. Okay? That is very important. So the goal for the time being in these negotiations is to find an agreement in principle. So if you want an agreement on what is the scope of play that we would then translate into a further agreement. So, of course, then, when we move to the discussion on an agreement, well, we would fully respect the interinstitutional obligations that we have as part of the treaty. And that will allow, potentially, of course, the Parliament to come in. Now, can I guarantee that the agreement will be final? What I can tell you is that as part of the request that we have made to the US, of course, we have been arguing quite strongly about the importance of standstill. Because fundamentally, the question, Chairman, on the duties is very relevant, but beyond the duties, the fundamental issue, the main issue that we have is one of absence of certainty. And that is what, why, again, from time to time, I come back with my professor hat, but why is the international rules-based system so important? It is because it sets the rules of the game. It gives legal certainty to our companies. So, of course, what is very important for us is to achieve a situation which would provide the greatest amount of legal certainty. Now, Mr. Chairman, again, you suspect that President Trump thinks about EU legislation. We are not in the business of second-guessing President Trump or anyone. What we have told very clearly the US counterparts, and I believe that Commissioner Šefčovič repeated this in the plenary last week or 2 weeks ago, the EU legislation that results from the EU choices is not up for negotiation. So this is very clear. We have made it very clear. So if the United States would like to have a conversation about one or the other pieces of legislation of the EU, well, this is not up for negotiation. Now, this does not mean that we cannot discuss non-tariff barriers. In all our trade agreements, we discuss non-tariff barriers. We never give up on our legislation. But there are many ways to discuss on non-tariff barriers. There are ways to facilitate, there are ways to recognize certain elements, there are ways to go for certain elements of mutual recognition and so on. And this is one of the things that we are doing. Now, all this discussion about are you ready to use the anti-coercion instrument, are you ready to use one or the other instrument? The anti-coercion instrument is not an end in itself. I mean, I understand the political value that some of you attach. The anti-coercion instrument is an instrument, is a legal basis that the Council and Parliament have decided to give the European Union. So the question is not when are you going to use the anti-coercion instrument. The question is it opportune for the defence of the EU interest to adopt measures that in the EU legal system can only be adopted under the anti-coercion instrument? And the answer to that question is we are looking at everything. Everything is going to be on the table, and we will decide when the time comes whether we need to use also the anti-coercion instrument. Can I confirm that we're not accepting the 10% baseline? Yes, I can. We have told the Americans that the negotiation cannot be about them keeping their baseline and us doing all the movement. This is an agreement. This is a two-way street. This is a negotiation, so it has to be a two-way street. So we have clearly not accepted the baseline, as we will not accept the announced potential new baseline of 30%. Now, I hear that the Commission is not able to get the negotiations done with the US. I wonder how many other countries have been able to get the negotiations with the US through the line. Nobody. There has been an agreement in principle with the UK that is still all up to see what has happened, and there has been a de-escalation with China. That's it. That's it. That's it. So the reality is that, I think, again, Commissioner Šefčovič must have told you in the plenary that this is a negotiation like no other. It is a very peculiar negotiation indeed. But this is, this is what we do, and we remain convinced that the best approach is to find a negotiated outcome for the EU interest. I will not speculate on what is the US strategy. But, I want to say something still. I mean, this is a negotiation, so you have to be able to anticipate that from time to time there is one of the negotiating partners that decide to do a certain move or the other. I think what is very important is to remain calm in these situations and not all of a sudden say, somebody has decided to make a move, so I throw my whole strategy and my whole tactics in the air. That would not be the right negotiating approach. So we're also not negotiating with a goal to avoid failure. Again, I can understand the political element, it's important. No, what we are doing is that we are seeking a negotiated outcome so that we can defend in the best way the interest of our companies and our citizens. This is the goal. Because again, this relationship is so important that we have to make sure that it remains, subject to the lowest tariffs and subject to the lowest barriers possible. So this is also the reason why we remain convinced that the right thing to do for the time being is to focus on the negotiated outcome. And rather than starting, flexing further our muscles on all kinds of measures, because we don't really see what this would bring. We don't think that this is, that this makes us look weak. It makes us determined to achieve what we want to do, which is a negotiated outcome. Now, I had an indirect question on what we would be negotiating, and I can confirm that indeed we have a certain number of elements that we're negotiating with the US. There is a tariff angle that covers both the so-called universal baseline tariff, but also seeking a solution on the sectoral tariffs. And for the time being, the two sectoral tariffs that worry us the most is, of course, the ones on cars and the ones on steel. But we're also talking about pharmaceuticals because we're very worried about the ongoing Section 232 investigation. And then, of course, there is also a discussion on non-tariff barriers, but I was just saying it's not a question of us removing or changing our legislation. It's a question for us to find things that we can do together with the US to the benefit of our companies so that we simplify the trade with the US. And I hope I have answered all the questions. Otherwise, if you let me know, I'll be happy to come back to one or the other. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Leopoldo. Second round, Christina.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Leopoldo. I have no doubt that you have an enormous responsibility on your shoulders during the course of these negotiations, and that negotiations are very difficult, very tough. But it is true that the United States, in the person of President Trump, has shown us how he plays the game on the basis of threats and blackmail. And people in my country, there's a saying that basically would, along the lines of the fact that he's more dangerous than a monkey with a crossbow. The problem is that Mr. Trump only answers to power. He's trying to rob sovereignty from us. He's trying to impose his agenda on our own agenda when it comes to manufacturing and the economy. I think we have to stand firm and we have to play the game and play to the rules, speak the same language as Mr. Trump. The American citizens, I think, also have to be able to see just what it is that their president is doing, and this running counter to the interests of the American economy. Because if we take a look at the tariffs, 30% would be a total ruin for our industry. And I think what we have to do is not think in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but the means to do this, and perhaps go to the WTO and turn to Mr. Trump and say that if he wants to come to an agreement with us, that's possible. But I think obviously what we have to do is support the Commission, but we have to show that we have a strong position. We shouldn't waver in the face of Mr. Trump, because all you have to do is take a look at some of the other countries like Canada who've withdrawn their tariffs, and the threat of a 35% tariff was then consolidated. So I think basically what we have to do is tell Mr. Trump, a dialogue, yes, but there's a limit to our patience. You're obviously going to continue to negotiate, but I have one question, a specific question for the agri-food sector. What's going to be negotiated? What's on the table? Is wine going to form part of the agreement? Are you in a position to be able to advance any kind of news? Because we know, of course, that this particular sector is highly sensitive, and they're going to pay the cost of any agreement with Trump.
Thanks a lot. And now I give the floor also to the rapporteur from AFET. Please.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear guest. It's a pleasure to be with you because tomorrow at AFET committee I will be presenting my draft report on EU-US political relations, a key strategic file for the committee and for the Parliament. And this report outlines the political direction for a more strategic, more balanced and more resilient relationship between the EU and the US, and of course this debate on trade is very important, and we are monitoring this and also keeping our fingers crossed for the trade negotiations. But also I would like to ask you to look at the report, and I'm also encouraging you to present amendments to this report because of the count constraints I was not able to cover every element we would like, particularly on trade. So thank you for this discussion and thank you for your presentation, and I hope this report will be important also for your committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thank you a lot for joining, and I'm sure that we have some additional conversation about that, so I'm looking forward to work together with you. Thanks a lot. Marie-Pierre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. Well, as we can see from what colleagues have said, there is a conflict here and a threat from the strategy of President Trump. Europe has its own judicial measures in order to tackle this, and we have to defend Europe and partnerships. We heard about the mobilization issue, and I believe that it's essential. We shouldn't just wait and see what happens. This is not a good strategy for the European Union. I do hear what you're saying about the need to be in good faith in terms of the negotiations, and Commissioner Šefčovič, etc. But we all have to be very united and show firmness given the situation, and we have to prepare all the retaliatory measures and have them ready. You spoke about a second package. We have to be credible, and that should be submitted to the European Parliament, because we have to hear what the stakeholders say, but we also have to have this kind of firm stance on the part of the member states. We have to have stability. We have to defend our jobs and our companies. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Julio.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much, Director DDG Rubinacci, for this discussion and for the informations. I have a problem with one important element of our previous discussion, mainly this standstill clause, I think it was called. And let me tell you, I firmly believe Trump will never stand still. So I think we have to find a new juridical and even a new term for this. Maybe I would call it predictability clause. Let's agree on 2 yearly reviews or something like, but standstill is something which is not good. Now, I clearly support the Commission to continue discussing calmly until the 1st of August. That's the best way. Prepare our bazookas, prepare our countermeasures, prepare whatever it is to be prepared, because that's very important. But now negotiate until the 1st of August. Hopefully you can reach a deal, but if you reach a deal from legal point of view, that's a memorandum of understanding. That's how it is called, the economic prosperity deal between UK and the US. But that was implemented by an executive order of President Trump. So that's a US legal document, but it's not a bilateral legal document. So what are we speaking about, even the WTO? What we are speaking about, our legal system, which has to be a rules-based system. So we have a lot of problems, many, very deep problems. And then I read one sentence of the letter of President Trump. These tariffs, and I quote, these tariffs may be modified upward or downward depending on your relations, on our relations with your country. So, I mean, that's a political issue. It's not a trade issue. That's not about rules. That's about sentiments. So in these conditions, I think it is very difficult. I think you will use cleverly the instruments and the negotiating space. I hope you will use them cleverly. And you will reach some result. And just to finish, I think that I don't know if monitoring group will be called in end of July or 1st of August, but anyway, perhaps, yes, sure, but anyway, I think that INTA members would appreciate if you send us some letter of information when it is the case, because you know that we will continue speaking. So also in August, we don't shut up. So then if you give us your arguments about your actions, that would be helpful for the one voice of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Julio. Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. A business partner who repeatedly commits fraud, who repeatedly filed for bankruptcy, who discriminates his people, and who insults and threatens everyone who does not bow in negotiations. I have the highest respect for the Commission and its optimism in that case. And I was 2 days ago at the 60th birthday party, and all those people, they're normal citizens who work their whole life, who are invested in the politics affecting them, and who follow the news. They asked me the same thing. What are we going to do about Donald Trump? So that's my first question to the Commission. What is the baseline of the communication strategy to inform the public for the next 2 weeks? Because lately the baseline has been our esteemed President of the Commission stating, I am optimistic. Will this also still be the baseline? Secondly, given the fact that Donald Trump just 3 days ago revealed that he was not aware of his Secretary of Defense cancelling the Ukraine aid, do you have the feeling that the President of the United States is aware of what his negotiators are actually saying in those negotiations? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Barry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the Commission for the update. You know, there's no denying that the immediate and severe impact of the updated tariffs proposed would have a huge impact on many sectors, you know, whether it be agri-food, aircraft, leasing and so forth. Notwithstanding the higher tariffs of up to 200% threatened on pharmaceuticals and computer chips. At the same time, we should remember that there is no guarantee that the administration will follow through on these threats. We've seen a deadline shifted once. We've seen many rates of tariffs floated from 20 to 50% and beyond. And one could understand and does understand the impulse of those calling for the EU to activate the €1 billion counter-tariff package, which was developed in consultation with member states and industry immediately. But the American administration have said they would simply escalate further in response. So that's why I believe and welcome the Commission's tactics. We must remain measured and strategic. Our goal must not be to out-tariff the US, because as we know and we believe their population will also realise that trade wars benefit no one. Our best chance and choice for now is to stay united, all member states, and I think that's the greatest surprise that has impacted on the US, our unification. Keep pushing for an agreement that protects exporters and consumers and our competitiveness, while ensuring we can respond firmly and precisely if and when, and only if and when, it's necessary beyond the breakdown of negotiations as we know them presently. And that's based on the extensive homework we've done as an entity by virtue of the consultation and agreement that has been reached between member states in relation to what would be necessary in such an unfortunate scenario. Could I just briefly ask the question on foot of the confirmation you've given in relation to the 10% tariff, baseline being one thing across many sectors, but the sectorial negotiations that are taking place, for example, in relation to steel and cars. Can you confirm, as was the case here last week when we met, when we reformed, things were going so well that we expected a framework agreement almost this week, but however, we understand the US and the way they work. Can you confirm the other sectorial sectors, being pharma, semiconductors, timber, agri-food? You just might briefly outline where you are there and if they have a similar status associated with the sectorial discussions in relation to cars and steel. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And Leopoldo, in addition to your answer for the first round, you didn't say anything on the car tariffs. So 0 on the European side, 15% on the US side. Is this in the discussion? And if this is in the discussion, will this be this MFN reduction of tariffs? Will also other trading partners benefit from our tariff reduction? And secondly, you explain a little bit the strategy of the Commission. Can you imagine that perhaps people on the ground, workers, think that this is a quite weak position? I had a discussion with a metal worker on Saturday, and they feeling that at the moment there's an estimation around about 50,000 jobs in the steel and in the car industry will go away because of the tariffs. And you mentioned the huge amount of money we are paying to the United States. Can you imagine that they are thinking that at the moment we have a quite weak position towards the United States? So last year we exported, the European Union exported to the United States 740,000 cars, and this will be not the case this year, that's for sure. And thirdly, of course, you mentioned that there is a deal with UK, and there's also one with Vietnam, but also there's an understanding with China. And you know that at the beginning there was a quite hard position of China, and then by sudden they made an agreement. Was this a total wrong strategy from China?
Thank you. It feels more and more like an exam, but anyway. No, going through again the various questions. I think what is said about, for example, the behavior of Canada, I mean, it shows how difficult the decisions are in these circumstances. But I think that it also shows that when we say that we have been firm, it is true that we have been firm, because we haven't conceded anything. We have engaged in negotiations where I've made a certain number of offers, which are, of course, conditional on getting, a two-way street from the US. We haven't changed our legislation. We have not proposed to change our legislation. We have not changed our tariffs. And I think that this is very important. Now, on agri-food, yes. I mean, we are talking also about agri-food. Of course, the Americans are very interested in certain agri-food sectors. Of course, we're not talking about hormone-treated beef or other things, but we are indeed discussing the certain agri-food sectors. You know that on spirits we have already a 0 for 0 deal with the US. So, for example, there it would be interesting to keep it. On wine, there are many possibilities to actually reduce the tariffs and make everybody happy. So these are the sort of conversations that we're having. So in various sectors, we are looking at, either preserving a situation which was mutually advantageous before the increase in the duties, or we are looking at finding solutions that would actually make sense for the industry on both sides of the Atlantic. Madame Vedren, I hear you. However, if I may, I would like to take a little bit of an issue with what you define as the Commission position as being attentiste in good English. What we're really trying, granted, I agree that the number of meetings is not in itself something that really indicates whether we are, doing the job, but fundamentally, it is through this continuous engagement that we are looking at defending the EU interest. And that is far from just sitting down and waiting for events to unfold. Mr. Winkler, when you seek to change the name of the clause, I cannot help but thinking about a movie by the Marx Brothers entitled A Night at the Opera, when they negotiate a contract with a sanity clause. And I would invite you to look at this movie once again. It will lighten up our mood, I think. But now the serious thing, I understand the questions from the European Parliament, which is, Commission, are you going to respect the legal system in the EU concerning, for example, the conclusion of international agreements? And the answer is, of course, yes. But the thing is that we're not there yet. We're first negotiating the animal, and then when we have the animal and we know where we're going, then of course we will fully respect all the obligations. Yes, what is the baseline for the Commission communication strategy? The baseline is, again, that when you look at the whole situation, and I think this echoes, for example, the draft report from the AFET committee that I've seen and the proposed amendments from this committee. And the fundamental goal is to continue to engage. This is the biggest partner that we have, by the way, on both sides. So the net interest cannot be to start destroying the relationship. The net interest must be to continue building this relationship. And this you do through an engagement, through negotiation, through listening to what the other is telling you, and by making sure that the other is also listening to what you're saying. Commissioner Šefčovič is involved with essentially Mr. Lotnik, who is the Commerce Secretary, and Mr. Greer, who is the USTR, and they both confirm all the time that the President is very well aware of what is being negotiated and is following this very closely. So so this is a situation. I can confirm that we're looking also at other sectors, not just cars and steel. For example, indeed, we really would like to avoid a situation where the US administration imposes Section 232 measures on things like pharmaceutical, but also a certain number of other materials, engines and jet engines and so on and so forth. So all this is being discussed. Now, on car tariffs, Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid I cannot give you the detail of what is being discussed, but I can confirm that there are many options that are being discussed. We have not been helped very much by some individual car manufacturers who have tried to find some kind of a side agreement. But again, I think that we have been able to maintain the unity of the EU by focusing on what we thought was the right thing. And the question of, in general, I mean, your question of bilateral MFN boils down to, are you going to have something that is compliant with the WTO obligations of the EU? And the answer is yes. We are looking at something that is compliant with the obligations of the EU in the WTO. And in the position of individual workers, we think about this every day, all the time, of course. I mean, the reason why we're doing this is because we want to find a solution that allows the EU to continue being and to improve its manufacturing basis, to avoid a massive delocalization of activities to the US, and to make sure that we can continue exporting the wonderful products that we produce in the EU to the US and to other markets. So this is a constant thought. We're not doing this for some kind of an ideal, an abstract reason. We're doing this because we're acutely aware of the economic interests of the EU citizens. China is in a very difficult situation. You know, when the US tell us, you have to follow us 100% on what we do on China, we always say, well, you know, we have a certain number of common interests, but we also have a very different trading and economic relationship with China than you do. So I don't think, well, first of all, I don't think as a matter of principle that the European Union should follow examples. I think that the European Union should set its own examples. But also the situation is totally different. What we have observed, however, is that the escalation of tariffs between the EU and China resulted in extremely damaging outcomes for both. So it confirms what we have been saying from the beginning, that tariffs are bad. And secondly, again, we have to bear in mind that the situation with China and the US is very different, and that, for example, one of the goals that the US administration had was to try to find a solution to the export licenses that China keeps, for example, on rare earths and so on. And, you know, we don't have all the information, but it seems to us that there could be still a lot of work there before an improved situation is found.
Thanks a lot, Leopoldo. We have still 5 minutes. One question. This morning, this Trade Minister Council happened. And due to my information, this second list was presented with the volume, as you mentioned, from 72 billion. So are there any news from the Trade Minister Council? Is now the list in the comitology, and will be the list ready for the 6th of August? And what was the climate, the temperature at the Trade Ministers? And Jürgen had also a question.
Yes, a small one regarding the lists as well, because if I understand it correctly, our list, if we have to retaliate, is approximately 25% in value of what their list is. So how do you view this in the Commission, and are you thinking of preparing a third list?
Oh, Martin, please.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to comment on something that you said. It was very interesting. You said during the negotiations you have to anticipate that one of the negotiating parties might make a sudden move. And I'm wondering why then the European Union or the Commission does not make a sudden move in reply to the US administration, because so far only the Trump administration made sudden moves during the negotiations, and you always advocated for strategic patience.
Okay. I will speak slowly so that I'm sure that you don't have any further questions. So first of all, I'm afraid I wasn't in the FAC trade meeting, so I cannot tell you what has happened, and I haven't received the report yet. But what I can confirm is the following. We have done this public consultation on a list that is worth 95 billion euros of imports. A list that includes a variety of products, bearing in mind that what we want to achieve is, if we were to decide to impose rebalancing measures, is to avoid shooting ourselves in the foot and having a situation where we don't create more damage to ourselves than the damage that would be created on the US economy. This is always the balance that we have to find. We always have to remember that any rebalancing measures are going to be costly from an economic point of view. So again, what is the EU interest? Is the EU interest to just flex our muscles and say, yes, I'm so strong, or is our interest to actually be careful, proportionate in what we do? Now, at the end of the public consultation, of course, we have recorded 500 and something answers, and as you can imagine, many answers were, please, not my product. Precisely because measures are costly. So we have done a whole analysis, we have looked at the various comments, and we have concluded that with a list of approximately 72 billion euros worth of imports, we have a list where we have excluded the products that would be the most problematic if we were to impose countermeasures or rebalancing measures. And now we have to indeed decide what we do with that. And this is why now in the coming weeks there will be a decision on what kind of rebalancing measures, if yes, when, and if so, how, and that is still to be decided. The practice in these matters is that indeed we inform the member states of what the outcome of this public consultation is, so that then we can prepare the ground whenever we decide to impose these rebalancing measures through a comitology procedure. So again, why is not the Commission? So sorry, Mr. Warburton. Yeah, I mean, we've always said that in any event we were not going to retaliate or rebalance or whatever dollar for dollar for many reasons. First of all, we have a trade surplus to the US, so we have much less imports in value than the US have in terms of the scope on which the measures are applied. There are a certain number of products that we import massively from the US where it would really be a boomerang if we were to impose countermeasures. Imagine all the energy products, for example. But also fundamentally, again, because tariffs are harmful, we have to remain very proportionate and we have to keep a very good level of balance between, on the one hand, finding a way to rebalance the relationship, protect our industries, but also avoid that we create additional costs to the U.S. economy. In terms of the strategy, if the other negotiator makes other moves, why don't you make other moves? We still think that we have. Well, first of all, I mean, let's be clear, because sometimes the discussion goes in directions that are very strange. We are very close to finding an agreement with the US. It's not that we are in deep seas and that the situation is unraveling. We are very close to finding an agreement with the US. And in the situation we're in, we remain convinced that the best way to get there is, again, talk, discuss, negotiate, put the things on the table, and progress in what we want, what we can propose, and what we want to see the US proposing. That is, for us, the best way to get to this deal, rather than now starting to show off that we have all these instruments and we should be able to using these instruments, while at the same time, of course, preparing, because we cannot exclude, and this is what I think the closing remark, we have to be agile and flexible now when the situation develops, because at a certain moment, the only thing that matters is whatever scenario unfolds, we are able to defend to the best of our capabilities the interest of the European citizens and our companies. This is the only thing that matters.
Unfortunately, there are 2 minutes still.
Just briefly, as an aside to those negotiations, is talks catering for issues around defence, spending and sharing, and also the issue of LNG gas, considering the time lag we have in Europe in relation to building up our sustainable energy production while exiting the over-dependency that we were cruelly exposed to of Russian gas.
Thanks a lot. And of course, Leopoldo, on the services side, we have a deficit. The United States has 100 million surplus, and the big tech are generating 1/3 of their benefit inside Europe. So there might be also some kind of leverage.
So on spending, I mean, the defense is, if anything is happening, is separate from these negotiations. On others, I mean, the U.S. administration and President Trump would be keen on seeing a certain number of commitments in purchases. You may remember that China promised to purchase a certain number of tons or billions of some products. So there are indeed certain products where we think that we could take or we could have a discussion on how much we would be prepared to purchase more from the United States. And certainly the questions on energy are part of that. For a very simple reason, is that, as a matter of fact, with Russia and so on, we continue to have important needs in our energy mix, and it could be a good idea to actually satisfy at least part of this mix with increased purchases from the US. Then it's all very complicated because LNG requires space, imports, and there's a whole logistical thing. But anyway, I can confirm that this is part of the discussions. On services, Mr. Chairman, again, we are looking at everything. If we want to impose certain measures on certain services, we would have to use another legal basis than the enforcement regulation that is limited to actions in goods. And that is, again, something that we will have to see. But I can confirm that DigiTrade and all the other DGs that are concerned in the Commission have been working quite extensively on various scenarios involving various different services sectors.
Thanks a lot, Leopoldo. I guess you made it. Examine. Wonderful. Thanks a lot for that. I think we will stay in contact on the whole issue. The deadline for amendments is Wednesday, the 16th of July at 11 o'clock, and we will probably vote on the 4th of November. I guess there will be a lot of space for additional negotiations, and AFET has foreseen the vote at the moment for the 2nd of December. Thanks a lot. This concludes the wonderful US item.